Hello, everyone. My name is Michelle Hausman. I am the artistic director of Miami New Drama. We are a theater company located in the heart of one of the most exciting cities in the world, Miami Beach, in South Beach on Lincoln Road, one of the most dynamic roads in the world, which is now empty as the rest of the great boulevards of the world are. I guess you could say that that there is a wound in the world, and a little bit it relates to what the conversation of today will be. Miami New Drama is a theater that mainly works on new plays. We are a theater company that produces world premiere plays as a majority of the work we do. And in that, we have a network of artists that resonate with how we see theater, how we see art, and how we see that junction of politics and art and culture. And I think that out of the great collaborations that we've had with many artists, Aurin Squire is the artist that I feel the most exemplifies who we are at Miami New Drama. Aurin has written with Billy Corben, Confessions of a Cocaine Cowboy last season, and wrote the extraordinary masterpiece, A Wonderful World, which we were very close to opening on the Colony Theater, is now living in hibernation. It's an extraordinary musical about the life and music of Louis Armstrong. And Aurin, you might be more familiar with his work on television. He wrote for the first season of This Is Us on NBC, and now he's working on 2 shows at CBS, The Good Fight and Evil. And this is the second time we get Aurin in our masterclass series. Our masterclass series has been what we've come as a result of the quarantine, the fact that the Colony Theater is closed. We have decided to open up all these free classes so we can share about the different disciplines of theaters with the most exciting professionals in the field. And so Mr. Squire is here today to share with us a class called If Your Body Could Talk. And I'll say, Aurin, my body now is extremely wounded. I fell off my bike 3 weeks ago, broke my wrist, broke my knee. So I'm really excited about this class. However, I am not going to be able to stay the entire time. So I want to introduce, before introducing you, Aurin, Viana Preti. Viana is Miami New Drama's Director of Education, who I worked with for the past 20 years, believe it or not, or 17 years. And I'm thrilled you're going to be leading this session with the brilliant Aurin Squire, my friend, one of the artists I admire most. So Aurin, welcome once again to the Masterclass series. I keep rewatching our last conversation in the archives of MasterMiND because you speak at a incredibly fast speed, and you give gold nuggets all throughout. So it really, I have to go back and slowly digest every brilliant thing you've said last time. So we have a Q&A section where people can ask questions, and a chat session where we can comment about what is going on. So with that, I leave it to you, Viana, to continue with this, and Aurin, I'm going to look at the archives of this as soon as it's over.
Oh, thank you.
All right, big hugs to everyone.
Big hugs.
Thank you, Michelle. Well, welcome everybody. There you have the Q&A session. Please, the questions there and the chat just to express whatever you want. But if you have a question, please, and the Q&A is better for us. And also, Aurin already told us that we're going to do some exercise. So when is the moment, and if you want to share, please, you can put it in the Q&A or raise your hand and we can bring you with video and audio. So Aurin, all yours.
Thank you, Rihanna. I was at Gettysburg College maybe 7, 8 years ago, and I was doing these different exercises, things that I think I brought up in the last MasterMiND class, parents' first date exercise, coming of age stories, road trip / Odyssey, Iliad stories, summer vacation stories, first job, first day at school, first day stories, moving to a new area stories. And there are all these different archetypes. And one of the professors at the school told me about how she used to be a director in New York City. And she was running around and she was doing multiple off Broadway plays and juggling and carrying equipment. And that how injuries on the body reflect our psychic state. So she was running around, and the reason why she had to stop is because she broke her back. Literally, that's not a metaphor. She broke her back. So you want to talk about a metaphor of Atlas, of carrying the world on your shoulders. And so it was her body's way, she said, of getting her to stop. It was her body's way of letting her know that she was doing too much and taking on too much weight, the load of a responsibility. So she broke her back. She was in bed. It wasn't a spinal sever, so she's not paralyzed, but she just had to stop. And that's how she ended up at Gettysburg College in Pennsylvania, this liberal arts school, a lot slower pace, a lot more about craft, academia, and teaching students. And she sort of, I don't want to say she gave up on the New York dream, but she realized what was more important. And sometimes our minds help us realize what's more important. And then sometimes our bodies actually recenter us and tell us, no, this is actually what you should be focusing on. And a few years later, I was walking through Times Square with a friend, or walking through the theater district in New York City with a friend. And I started talking about the different scars on my body that I have opinions about. And it's not like I voice them out loud and say like, oh, I love or I hate, but I have a steady dialogue towards these things. Subconsciously, very subtle, a frown or tucking in or whatever it is. When I was a wrestler, from stuff that's obviously exterior, not that deep, to things that get more and more personal, more and more intimate. When I was a wrestler, you can't see it. Well, it's on this arm. You can't see it that well because my skin is tanning, but wrestlers get a lot of skin diseases. And so I was given this ointment by a doctor for these bumps on my arm. He didn't tell me that the ointment had acid in it. And so I was putting them on this section of my arm that bends. And so it burnt off sections of my arm. Every time I bent, it burnt off. Not only that, it burnt off another section. And so I have these scars that I could have been slathering all over my skin. And so this scar reminds me of doctor incompetence and annoys me a little bit. And like doctors who think they're God and don't tell you medicine and what it's doing to your body, and you just take it and it damages me. But also I should have asked, maybe I should have done research. This scar also reminds me of wrestling and skin diseases and all the other things we go through and the scarring and bruising of wrestling. I have, my appendix were removed in 2004 during the Democratic and Republican convention, where I was very angry and yelling at the TV and eating a burrito. I remember I was eating a burrito, yelling at the TV, not feeling good for like a week. And then I had to get my appendix out. My appendix burst and I had to, or partially burst, I had to get that removed. And so I have this scar on my stomach, which, you know, listening to your gut, I guess, means something. So the scars and the dents and bruises on the body not only mean something to us, but they trigger a memory.
Okay.
They also trigger the area of the body it's on. Obviously, a scar on an arm is different from a scar on my chest near my heart.
Yeah.
Is different from a scar near my eye. Is different from a scar on the top of my head or a dent or bruise. So we started just talking while I was walking with my friend about all the little things, the piercings, the scars, the dents, the bumps, the burns we have, the bruises, the beauty marks, the amputations, the bald spots, the six packs, the cellulite, the wrinkles, the freckles, the keloids, the lesions, the cesarean lines, the private genital area scars or dents or freckles or beauty marks, as well as invisible scars, scars that you know are there that could be as small as a dot, but that mean something psychologically. And we all have scars that are psychological. And I want to make clear that not all scars are bad, or not all of the things we're talking about are necessarily bad things. They're just things that we have a conversation with a lot. So there are happy scars that people have. One of my writing colleagues brought up the burn on his mother's hand is a happy scar because it had to do with cooking food and cooking food for the son. The cesarean line of giving birth to someone might be a happy scar. The time you learned how to ride a bike and you ended up with the scar, but that showed you were maturing into late adolescence or some form of adulthood or puberty. These are also marks on your body, and all of them are landmarks. And so then I started thinking about narratives that I take for granted that possibly began from examining an area of the body as a landmark and becoming obsessed with it. And some of these stories are directly related to those body parts. Some of them are metaphor. Some of them are just characters within an overall drama that has a particular trait. If you're talking about Scarface or Scar in The Lion King, Scar in The Lion King isn't his story, but the scar definitely means something psychologically and emotionally in comparison to his brother, who is the king, who he kills. So I want to make clear that this exercise and what we're talking about isn't just necessarily the narrative based around the literal incident that caused you to have whatever you have on your body, whatever landmarks you have on your body. There is a multitude of ways that this can be adapted, far too many to get into in 2 hours. But I will run through a few that I've listed. Obviously, The Rose Tattoo by Tennessee Williams. There is a musical by Christian Child called Bella, An American Tall Tale. And the lead character, Bella, is a Black woman. And as it's listed, here's the synopsis of Bella. All aboard for a Western musical adventure, the likes of which you've never experienced. As a wanted woman of mythic proportions looks to begin life anew out west, Bella takes us on a trip of a lifetime to escape her scandalous past and bounce into her awaiting arms of Buffalo Bill, Rowdy Wild, Hilarious, and other things, and other characters. So Bella's about a Black woman's butt. And you don't know that, obviously they don't say that in the synopsis, but it is a Black woman's butt that travels around the world. And it's embodied in this very buxom, boisterous character called Bella, who's the life of the party, who gets involved in these quirky, weird adventures, who always finds herself in a jam and finds a way to get out of it using her butt and her body and other things. And some people, when this play premiered, hated it and took offense, like, how dare you, this is gross. And other people found it hilarious because you're talking about an area that maybe a lot of people obsess over, either like or dislike, but something that the writer had a dialogue with and
Okay.
all of its complexities, and then went on a road trip with her butt as the lead character and called the butt Bella. Here is another thing that's
Cute.
about the same topic, but more dramatic, tragic side of Venus by Susan Laurie Parks. So Venus is about Venus Hottentot, the Hottentot African woman in the early 20th century, late 19th century, who was brought to England and who was exploited, who was put in a cage, who was exhibited because she had a very large butt. And so the story is set in Africa, South Africa, England, and Paris. The play is a response to some of the known historical events that occurred to Hosan woman known as Sarajita Bartman. Venus a Hottentot was her nickname. So that's also examining the butt, finding a historical angle based upon an actual case. And so when you're looking at, I'm just going to list a few other things. The Whale by Sam Hunter, a heavily overweight guy who also reads essays, and he's reading Moby Dick, a morbidly obese, overweight guy, dealing with, I'm presuming, the writer's issues with weight, but then he exaggerates it to an extreme level by creating someone who's going to die because who can't get out of the house. And at the same time is incredibly intelligent and intellectual and trapped by their body and by their desires. The Miracle Worker, talk about another extreme, based upon Helen Keller and a real figure. The Vagina Monologues, perhaps one of the most famous ones. There's just a series of incidents, a series of sketches and monologues about women talking about that most sacred, private, conflicted, confusing, controversial part of the body, and using that as a portal to examine femininity, politics, race, all these other issues within the Vagina Monologues. A play by Julian J. Christopher, who's a new dramatist playwright in New York City. The first play he ever had done was called Man Boobs, about gay men who are differently shaped, who are self-conscious about man boobs. And so he didn't skirt around the issue. It's directly called Man Boobs. The Nose by Nicole Gogol, the short story. Elephant Man, another historical figure. Kimberly Akimbo by David Lindsay Aubert, teenage girl with an aging disease. So she ages backwards as she's losing her body and becomes older and older and older, or she ages dramatically fast, I should say, in leaps and bounds. And then, Legally Blonde. So you think, well, what's Legally Blonde?
Yeah.
It's her dialogue with being called stupid because she has blonde hair.
That's true.
So she took this and she has all the traits of being a, quote, dumb blonde, but she's a brilliant lawyer who's going to Harvard. So she's not just blonde. She likes to wear pink. She has a little cute dog. She talks about her clothes. She's very conscious about it. So she has all the markings of a stupid blonde person, but then she has this trait which goes against that type, legally blonde. And so she's becoming an expert lawyer and is smarter than everyone in the class. So it's important. It's not just the weight with the whale. It's not just she's blonde. They take that and then they exaggerate it and they build a whole world around the, I guess, markers of that, of being a dumb blonde, of being overweight and gay for the whale. And you build a whole world around that, and all these character traits fall out of that. One of my favorites growing up is Mr. Magoo. Mr. Magoo is someone who has bad eyesight. That's an invisible scar based upon a limitation, being visually impaired. But he creates a whole character. He's not just visually impaired. He can't hear things. He walks very gently, and everyone's trying to fool or trick him, and he foils crimes and awful incidences almost happenstance, like Columbo, by just stumbling through incidences because he can't see. So it can be comedic. They don't all have to be sad and tragic. And Mr. Magoo is one of my favorite characters because who would think that someone would create a character based upon being visually impaired and create an entire world that juxtaposes Mr. Magoo with these evil, duplicitous people who can see very well, who think they are smarter than Mr. Magoo, And they probably are, but Mr. Magoo just stumbles around and just works his way through things and knocks people over and, foils bank robberies. So there are other traits that are related to scars that are based upon our impairments that I think count, and that count as things that we have a dialogue with. So I wanted to talk about an opening exercise. We're going to talk about our scars and our qualities that we feel are scars. And if you could take 1 minute and you can time it out, or I could time it out on my phone, but I want you to list 3 things you talk to on your body the most. 3 things, because I feel like if you just choose one, you might skip something that you don't think about. So take a minute and I will time it. And we're just going to choose 3 things on the body that we obsess about. And I am going to, I'm going to give this a minute, but I want to say that you can do a lot more than a minute. I'm just doing a minute so we can get through all of these questions, but feel free to go back and answer these more extensively. So 3 things, these are, we won't even call them scars. Let's detach ourselves a bit and call them landmarks. So we're going to choose 3 landmarks: your man boobs, your scars, preferably a scar, at least 1 or 2 scars or dents or a bump or something that you gained through this life, or something that you've had subtracted through living this life. So take a minute and I'm going to time it and we're just going to list them. Go. Okay, so that is time. So we chose 3 landmarks on the body, excuse me. And I want you to very briefly for a minute, write down the 3 ones that you have chosen, and to write down, put them in 3 different columns, where they are on your body. And if it's something like being fat or overweight, pick an area of the body. So just don't say my body or I'm too skinny. Pick an area of the body that accentuates, that you talk to the most about it, and the dialogue that happens. And just write on those 3 different columns. So make those 3 columns of these things. And right there, write some of the stream of consciousness dialogue that you have about these things. And we will see which one is the louder. Which one do you talk to the loudest? So just go and at least write 1 thing for each and see which one you talk to the loudest. I'm going to give this another minute. So that's been a minute wrapping up. Finish that, whatever you've written. So if you're like me, you had 3 things and maybe you thought you were going to talk about one thing, but another landmark was louder and actually tapped into something deeper and more vulnerable. And this is a part of writing that is difficult. And there's no one who can train you to do this. There's no class or workshop you can take. It's about brutal honesty. It's about brutal, borderline, painful, psychological analysis and honesty of what triggers you. And quite frankly, I wrote some noble stuff down here, but the thing that triggered me most was the vanity landmark, the thing that struck on my vanity. And I'm not someone who spends a lot of time, you know, with using makeup or prepping myself every day, but it struck a nerve right here. Growing up, I was always fat and I was always conscientious about this, the chesticle area, and this. No matter what I would do, no matter how hard I work out, unless I was like my skinniest ever, like almost not eating, there was always this, which annoys the fuck out of me because it's like a woman. It's very annoying. It taps into my vanity. It's emasculating. It's all these things that I do not want to address. That's being brutally honest. I have other things written here like my appendix scar, the bump on the back of my head, which I got when I was a boy, when I busted my head open, my scar when the BB gun backfired. We can come back to this. This is actually interesting. This is actually an interesting scar and story. But the one that's speaking loudest is that, because it gets underneath my my armor. It goes against the kind of person I want to be. And it's something that if I could have it removed or changed or altered, that above any of the other things, I would. The bump on the back of my head, I mean, it's there. I don't really care about it. This is no one cares about this. Or even this, no one really, I wouldn't, if someone said, would you have surgery for this? They're like, no. But this, even if there was a chance of something happening to me as a result of it, I would consider this, because this is the one that I talk to and think about the most. This is the one that I angle myself and I work out and I do these things. So that's, if I'm being brutally honest, and you have to be brutally honest with yourself. This isn't, and by the way, sharing is optional. If sharing is going to hinder you from being brutally honest, do not share at this point in time. So just keep that in mind. And so we have this landmark on the body that we talk to the most. I want to separate ourselves from this landmark a bit and not refer to it as a landmark on our body. Let's just call it for now an object. Yes, we are literally objectifying ourselves for the purposes of some more honesty, because it's a little bit easier to examine something when we look at it in a box. So you have a main object. Whatever landmark on your body spoke to you the loudest is your main object. And I want you to take a minute and just not complete sentences, jot down some traits associated with this main object. What are some things associated that society associates with this main object? What are some things your family and friends associate with this main object? Remember, the location of it is also a clue of where this object is, if it's something close to an area that triggers you. And so what is the size and shape of it? It's brutal honesty. This is journaling time that you keep to yourself and maybe you use as a character later on. So I want you to take a minute, and you can go back and write more, and just jot down things and character traits about this main object. So I'm going to time you for a minute and go. And that's another minute. So we're gonna stop there. And so you have this object that has these things that you associate with yourself, that society associates traits to, that you associate traits to, that your family and friends have called things and associated things and have nicknames and all these other things. And so now this object becomes a character. So we went from a landmark on your body to an object to now a character. Now I want you to start by defining this character and the dialogue you say to this character. This is not you. This is a character that embodies the object off of you. So this is a character, a nebulous character that you don't even have to give complete shape to right now, that you are talking to. And what are the things that you are saying to this character? And don't worry, this is going to get less painful. But what are the things you are saying to this character for a minute? Okay, that's a minute. And this is a section you could actually spend a lot of time with. You could spend pages and pages writing down what you say and what society says about this character. Be careful, is all I will say. So this character has been told all these things. You have told this character all these things. Now, here's where it flips. You're gonna shut up for a second. You're gonna let the character talk. So this character has been told all these things their whole life, whether it's they're dumb and blonde, or you're a klutz who, you're like an old man in a boy's body because you can't see. Whatever the thing is that you talk to yourself the most. I remember when I was a kid, I think someone who was trying to bully me called me Four Eyes. And I just laughed because that is not a way to get under my armor. I don't care about my glasses. But some people, that would ruin them. So bullies a lot of times try to poke around and find the thing. And so he called me Four Eyes, and I was like, okay, all right. This I don't really think about that because glasses are sort of normalized now. It's not a big thing. Yeah. And so, but there have been some other things which do get under, and that I could hear the voice repeating and all the things. So this character is now going to be given a name. And what has this character been called? What are the nicknames, the baby names, the taunts, the privileged names, the cool names this character has been given? And so I want you for a minute, and we're going to get to sharing soon. I want you for a minute to come up with a nickname. Don't think about it too much, of this character, whatever the nickname or name is. And I want this character to start talking by telling everyone to shut up. Shut the F up. Sit down. Shut up. And so that is the first first word, first sentence I want the character to say. Then they are going to announce their name. And then you are going to write as a character for 1 minute. And just whatever spells out, spells out. If this is a character responding to all the names and things that's been called, all the compliments, all the insults, all the bullying, all the bragging throughout its term. So for 1 minute, name your character and then respond to what other people have said about this character. So you're writing from the character's perspective. Oh, I think it's been a minute. Sorry, did I get carried away? I think it's been a minute. So your character was talking. A few more things. Now, I want you to take, what are the emotional traits of this character? Are they soft? Are they hard? Are they anxious? You have a name for this character. What are some of the emotional traits? And think about some ways you can exaggerate these traits or go against it with their character type. So we mentioned Mr. Magoo is an exaggeration. It's taking being visually impaired to being totally impaired and at the same time functioning in the world and helping people out, but almost in a klutz way. And so Mr. Magoo is an exaggeration of that. Bella is an exaggeration of a big butt that goes on an adventure, or, you know, never trust a big butt with a smile. Poison is an exaggeration of Bella is like, okay, this is a big butt that smiles a lot and gets lied to a lot and goes on this adventure in the Wild West and meets all these wild characters. So, or they are mostly alike and there's something different about them, like Legally Blonde. There's something that's out of the norm about them. And even the whale, even though he has 90% of the traits, he's incredibly smart. And so think about whether you're exaggerating the traits of the character and then what goes against the stereotype. And so write that down for a minute. You don't have to be perfect. It's okay. Is your butt solving crimes? I don't know. Okay, so that is the exaggeration of your character who you have named. Here's some other questions to consider. for later on. When it comes to the character, what foods and music does your character like? You could spend a long time on this. You could just go off on your own and do this. I'm not going to do this right now. But what foods and music does your character like? What do they dislike? What's their spinach? What's their kryptonite? Another question is, if your lead character has a sidekick, the sidekick slash friend is someone who likes the qualities that they have, but is a lesser version of that. So in Teenage Dick by Mike Lew, the adaptation of Richard II, he is someone with, he's a lead character who's a teenage boy in high school with cerebral palsy who is plotting to be the prom king. He is a terrible person because it's based off of Shakespeare. So you have this conflict of like, okay, he's vulnerable, but he's terrible. I kind of hate him, but I admire him for his skill. And a sidekick is a best friend who's a woman who is in a wheelchair. And so it's another version, another aspect of, and the sidekick is more honest, but she admires Richard's tenacity and smarts, but is more honest and is another facet of that. So you consider a sidekick character, you can keep it or leave it, or a friend character, someone they talk to who likes their traits, who at least likes some, if not all of their traits. And then you consider a family member. Find an aunt or a dad or a mom who has complex feelings about the character. They either don't like them or have insulted them, but they love them. They just want them to change. They love them, but they keep buying, gym memberships for the character, as a hint. So it's a tough love, complex love situation. And then, of course, the big thing is who is the antagonist to your character. So for Mr. Magoo, the antagonists are people who can see, who are clever, who have their full capabilities, who are very skilled. For the whale, it is Sam Hunter's play The Whale. It is a Mormon who believes in Christ, who's very faithful, who's done all these things, and who's talking to this morbidly obese guy who's gay and has all these strange predilections, but who's incredibly smart. And you have this fresh-faced Mormon who has his own stuff that he's dealing with, and he comes in a conflict with him. The Whale's also great because one of the conflicts is with the whale's son. The lead character has a son who is disgusted by him, a daughter, excuse me, who's disgusted by him, and all these other things. So that is an opposite that strikes even closer to home. So who are the friends? Who are the friend sidekicks? Who are the family who knows about the character's history and has a complex love, hate relationship, or love, dislike relationship? And then who's the antagonist? And I guess we can give that a minute if you want to write down just really briefly a quick jot of the character traits. You don't have to come up with a name of the friends / sidekick, the family member, what they're like. Do they come from the same ilk? Are they a family of blind people, or is this the one blind kid out of the bunch? And then the antagonist. So I'll give that a minute and just real quick write it down. Okay, and that's 1 minute. So I don't know if people want to share some things at this point. We could take a break. So we've created a character. We began with the landmarks on the body. We found the ones we talked to the most. We've circled one. You can always go back and examine the other ones. Circle one we have the most dialogue with in a positive or negative way. We've taken that landmark and turned it into an object and examined the emotional traits, the psychological, intellectual curiosities, and the color and shape of that, and even what that looks like tangibly. We've taken that object and turned it into a character. We've taken that character and had them do a monologue and describe and vocalize and speak out against what they've been called, what they've been accused of, what they've been told. And then we've added the character traits and populated their world with friends, family, and then enemies and antagonists. And you're beginning to get a sense of a character that can stand alone as a play or as a story by itself, or it can be a character in a larger play or in a larger world, or two characters from different parts of the body can start talking to each other as friends, or whatever you want here. But that's the beginning step of I think, coming up with a character. I should ask, are there any questions?
Let's see.
I could go forward, but I should stop for a minute. Is there anyone who wants to share? Is there anyone who has questions?
You can lower.
I think Vanessa had a question.
Yes, but it was about the prompt.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So is there anybody else has a question? Otherwise, I will keep going. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Why do you say just a minute? I know because it's just time, but it's also like to, I don't know, to something that you cannot like overthink. The character is just like get your intentions, you know, like alert. It's for that, or it's just.
I mean, ideally, you don't want to overthink it. You could take 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay.
But it's the first things that pop in your mind.
Okay.
And the things that make you uncomfortable pop in your mind first. The things that
Okay.
haunt you, the things that terrorize you. I think if you try to overthink it, it becomes too intellectual. It becomes very, you know, oh, I've thought it out. I've honed away all the unpleasant things. And you need those unpleasant things.
Okay.
And another question is, Gloria Nunez asked, is this a tool you use to come up with material or something you can use to shape an existing idea? The answer is both. And so you can use it for a work you're stuck with. And the easiest way to unstick yourself is to add a piece of yourself into that work. Usually writer's block comes when we don't have a connection to the work. And so the easiest tricks to connecting yourself to the work is to add your mom and dad, the people you know, or add your sister, come up with another name for them, or add yourself. Now, adding yourself is tricky because it's overwhelming to add all of you. So sometimes you add a piece of yourself. You add the scar. You add whatever that is, and you embody it in a person. You personify it in an actual person, but you know that that is actually you who is warning this character if they're a wizened old veteran who's seen it all because they have this scar. Or does a scar make them bitter or cynical or angry? Does a scar make them giving? Is this a happy, like, and so you use those in any way you want to either open yourself up or as a launch pad for your own work by having someone talk.
Okay. Alicia wants to share.
Great. Do you want to?
So yes, Claudia is going to. We have another question also in between. No, Alicia said no, I don't want to share.
Okay.
Sorry, Alicia.
Should the scar or fear be obvious or clear to others, or can it be hidden? No, it can be hidden. It can be hidden or it can be obvious. I think that sometimes if you are dealing with comedy, the scar is hidden, and then usually someone has some monologue in the third act, or someone has some statement that's like the emotional underpinning of where this is coming from. But it's the jokey side first. Or the flip side of that is if you're doing like Shattered or Mr. Glass, you know, and all these things, is that it's the first thing you notice about the character. And that's more dramatic. The person has this thing they're working with, and, you know, they've seen it all. So it depends on the tone you want to strike. If you feel like beginning with the scar or the element is going to freak people out, and that's the purpose of what you're trying to do, or that's the tone you want to strike, then do that. If you want to begin with making people laugh about it and making yourself laugh and get to the more complex things later, you can begin by hiding it. But that is a great question. It depends on what you, obviously horror films, you begin with the decrepity. You begin with the invisible thing, or the thing you're fear of losing your virginity has launched many horror films. And that invisible scar of, will I be good enough? Will girl like me? The psychological scar of that has launched many, many horror films. And the murderer who's going around is that fear that I won't be good enough. And so the murderer is going around killing the cool kids who are good at sex, who are sexy and having fun, whatever, and living their life. And so they're going around as their anger and fear and stabbing people and killing them. And the people who end up living at the end of a horror film tend to be the not cool jocks. I mean, or the jocks that have nuance, or something else is going on that they're working through, or the girl who's more nuanced and isn't just, you know, flashing everyone and going out behind the lake to make out and all these other things. Those people get eliminated first, because it is a fear and a hatred of the jock, and a fear and a hatred of puberty and of not being worthy, and all the other sexual angst and fear that is attached to that. And unfortunately, in the past, for men, they would take that out on the female body. So it's about murdering, brutalizing the female body because they're scared of it, because they're frightened of it, because they're terrified of it. And puberty brings out all that awareness. So that's a genre that is, you know, like launched by a bunch of things. So here's another question. Can you start with the situation and not the character? Yes, you can. We're going to get to that later. This is creating the character. So then you have the narrative you can get into. And then the question is, how does the character fit within the narrative? And that's what's called a role. So you begin with the raw element, which is the sense memory of you. You build a character around that, but the character is wandering around in the world without a purpose. And you either give that character a purpose that's very strong, which becomes a plot, and the world flows out of that, and the character's role is within what they have to do, or you create a world and then you introduce a character into that world, and then how do they fit? What is their role within that world? How do they shake things up? How do they make this day different from any other day? That's a way to introduce it. And we're going to talk about some general Blake Snyder, Save the Cat methods of storytelling and narratives.
Okay. Elizabeth Cruz wants to share. It's confirmed that she wants to share.
Okay, Elizabeth, yes, please share. Do you know how to do that?
Yeah, Claudia is going to do it. There she is.
Okay.
And after that, maybe Alicia wants also to share.
Okay. So hi.
Hi,
this is great. Thank you so much. Well, what's interesting is that I wrote 3 different objects, and then I chose one that I thought would be an easier one. One was like my chin. I have a problem with this. Like, I hate it. And I've always had it, no matter when I was a kid, you know, and I've always been very skinny, and it's always been there. So that's always been a problem.
What are the nicknames that people have called that, or what nicknames do you call it?
The funny thing is, I've never had anybody say anything about it to me.
Well, what do you call it?
I just always call it the double chin. I hate it. You know, I see it as something that's sagging. As I get older, it started to pull us down. And everybody has always said, oh, you're going to look younger. And they say I do look younger. I don't see it. I still have, you know, that. So, well, what I wanted to say is I went through and I put all these, the character, I called her Baby because she has a baby face, right?
That's a good name.
I think it kind of gives it that. And I gave her the sidekick of a tall, thin woman that doesn't have the double chin, looks down at her, so she never really sees her double chin. And so she really admires her in that way. And then this sidekick also wears like glasses and loves sports, where this other one is more intellectual, the baby is. The family member would be an older brother who's caring, but also a bully at the same time. Kind of points out things that really bug her, but probably points out the double chin. And then the antagonist would be someone who's perfect, that any way you look at her or him, they have this perfect chin and everything looks good. High cheekbones. It's just that perfect sculpted face.
Well, I would ask, is it perfect or is it just a particular type? Because what is that type that you're describing? I would lock down on it rather than calling it perfect. What is it? Is it you said the high cheekbone, V-shaped jaw, whatever that thing is the type that Baby thinks of as perfect. This character might feel another way about herself, but Baby sees this person as having the perfect traits because of these things you just listed.
Okay. But as I wrote this and all, I just didn't feel like there was really anything truly coming. I don't know if you felt about that. I have a scar from hysterectomy that was an emergency hysterectomy. And the only person that really, I thought really bothers is me. I can't wear a bikini, or I can. And one day I went and wore a bikini at the beach because my husband said, it's a scar you should be proud of. It's something you survived. You would have died otherwise. I was out there with my brother-in-law and his wife, and then later they're talking, they go, so we were wondering what that scar is. I mean, it just looked like it was really bad. Like you had to, and I just like, people are staring at this scar. So I was thinking, does that make more for a better character?
I like Baby, but if this is triggering you, obviously the location of that on your body makes it more personal, makes it more dangerous, makes it more vulnerable. So I would say explore that. And you can have Baby as another character, even within this genre, because I love that name. And I almost picture it with like a high voice. And like, you know, a high voice, a woman who calls Baby. And, you know, like from those 50s movies where like, talks like that. And, you know, stumbles upon things, or whatever the traits are, Baby. And then have the lead character or have this other character dealing with whatever this thing. If you explore the hysterectomy scar and what that means, positive and negative, what it makes you think of your children, of mortality, whatever the things are, what you wish you could see in a different light about it. What if that was a beauty mark? Do you explore that fully? Then you have a character that I would say you probably want to hide that. You want to build up all these layers about the character and have that be underneath, that gets revealed later, or you want to exaggerate it. What does that mean when doctors go in and remove something or cut something of the female anatomy to help you, but that leaves a scar behind that then is a trait that you consider not desirable on the female body and the female anatomy? So what is the conflict? What is the issue there? What is the tension? And we get a little bit to that later as far as structures, but that's very fascinating to me. Both of the characters.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great.
Do we have time for for more sharing, we have Alicia and Natalie.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
Hi.
Hi,
Hi,
how's it going?
Natalie.
Hi. I kind of, I guess my character is kind of the most obvious one for my list. It ended up being my soft belly. And, I guess I've always spoken very negatively to it and about it. And I've always had, I was bullied for it. I used to be bigger when I was younger. And even though I have lost a lot of weight and I'm pretty athletic, my belly is always, a soft part of my body that I wish was quote unquote harder and firmer. And so as I was kind of refining the belly as an object, the immediate nickname that came up to me was Softy, which also is something I've been called emotionally too. And then it started kind of making sense on another level because I've always felt also ashamed of being emotionally too soft, I guess, quote unquote, and not like tougher. And then something you said about either exaggerating some of the traits or also finding something out of the norm about the character is that I guess Softy is really soft and jiggles and loves moving to music. But the one thing that people don't really know about her, or that she doesn't even really know about herself, is that actually, so my thing is that I have a very strong core, but I have a very soft belly. So I'm very athletic and I can do a lot of pretty quote unquote like strong things using my core, but my belly's still soft. So I think I like the idea of people thinking that she's soft and lazy and don't believe in her, but actually she is stronger than she thinks and than everyone else thinks. And immediately what came to mind as a sidekick was my my arms. They were also on the list in the beginning, but they are similar because they are kind of jiggly and soft, but I have pretty strong arms. I can lift a lot of weight. I love weightlifting, but they're still kind of soft. So I like that. I didn't come up with a name for the sidekick, but that my arms are kind of like, maybe it's a chick that's a little bit more rock and roll, and it's like, fuck it, I believe in myself. I don't care that I'm as jiggly, but then Softy cares more and is a little bit more, I sort of like affected by how everyone doesn't believe in her, and that somehow her relationship with the sidekick, who is a little bit more punk and like fuck the shit, kind of takes Softy onto this adventure of leaving her aunt behind as a family member. I thought of an aunt who is pretty much my mom. But I thought of her as an aunt because nowadays I believe that my inner mom would be the character of the real mom, who's maybe not around. Just like my inner mother wasn't around. And now I'm starting to find her again. And then my mother, who cares a lot about appearance and all of those things, would be, I guess, this aunt character, who has been, I guess, suppressing Softy for a long time. But now she's gonna, I think, leave home. It might be a coming of age kind of story where she leaves home with this new sidekick. And yeah, I didn't get to like antagonists, because when I think of antagonists, I think essentially all of society in a way. But I would like to, I guess, refine who would be some more specific antagonists that they could encounter. Yeah.
That's great.
In this adventure, yeah.
And then we're going to talk later about, you could shake that up. Is it a family of vampires? Is it whatever the thing is? So it becomes a weird comedy. It's like, oh, this is what they're obsessed about. Vampires are very vain, so they're killing people, and they're like, have you thought about getting like a 6-pack ab as they're like draining someone's blood, or they're having this running commentary? It's just like, guys, I eat healthy. They're like, do you really? Or are you like drinking fat people's blood? You need to start drinking lean people's blood. Whatever the conversation is, you take it and you turn it on its head, and you can make it funny by setting it in a weird environment that you wouldn't expect to find these people. Like, what? Why are they talking about this?
Right.
But it's relatable that
Yeah.
vampires would be vain and they would talk about each other's bodies. Or
Right.
like, have you seen what she's eating lately? Or, I don't know. Oh, here she comes. Hey. Or whatever that thing is. But yeah, that's good. We should probably get to that. Unless Alicia, do you want to? Who's the next?
Alicia is ready. Yeah.
And then we'll
Thank
get
you.
to. Thank you, Natalie.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Natalie.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Alicia is coming.
All right. So, Alicia, do you want
Hi,
to?
good morning.
Good morning.
Hi.
Hi.
You now. I'll share quickly. I thought other things would stand out, but actually, like the past two people, my thighs just being no thigh gap, seeing them as a sign of like stability and feeling the lack of support, I think, is the original dialogue. And then the thing that kind of shocked me was the idea that I remember there was like a cross your legs challenge on Instagram and just feeling like, oh wait, crossing your legs is synonymous to being a lady and having, thinking about all of that. I named her Montana. And thinking about just all of the great meals and all the great walks that we've had, that Montana's had, and the ability to smash, I guess, anything. I guess like when I think about like in the grocery store or something where I kind of like lose my hands or the ability to use my hands because I'm full, the first thing I do is put them between my thighs, right? So like there is some sort of strength there, and just trying to figure out like who the antagonist would be, or the sidekick would be someone who maybe someone who loves these traits would be somebody who maybe can't gain the weight. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe all the skinny guys who want skinny thighs would be the antagonist. And yeah, so there's just quick thoughts there.
That's good.
Nice.
And yeah, there's so many things. The more specific you get, like you said, the thighs, the more nicknames you can come up with, the more things that people think about it. The positives and negatives become the emotional character traits. So if she's stable, if she's someone who likes to explore, but then when she explores, she realizes there's a consequence of that if people judge and see her, then it becomes like, okay, this is a character who's out in the world, and I don't know whether this is a story by itself or whether this is just a character within another story, but it is an attribute of you that we can reroute how we talk about our stuff. And I think a lot of times we think of things as ugly or pretty or perfect or gross. But really, all body parts, just like all things, have no nature from their own side. There's no nature to this being pretty or this color or shape or whatever being ugly or pretty or gross or attractive. It's a narrative. It's 100% a narrative that we have been told, that we have bought into, and that we begin repeating, almost like it's the truth. But if you analyze it, there's some people who think that these traits that people are listing are very attractive, and there are other things that people find very ugly.
Yeah.
And so what's the truth? If some people find it very ugly, some people find it very attractive, and some people are indifferent to it, which is generally how things go in thirds, then who's right? Well, if no one's right, then it has no nature. And if it has no nature, then which narrative do you want to choose that's going to help you out the most? You talk to it. If it has no nature, and I keep selecting the bad narrative, I'm choosing to select the bad narrative that's going to make me feel bad, rather than examine the other narratives, or rather than examine the empowering aspects of it, the tenacious aspects of it, the uplifting, the transformational aspects of it. And underneath our scars and our dents and our bumps and our bruises, that's what this exercise is getting at the heart of. It's retelling the stories that we've told about ourselves at our most intimate possession on earth, which is our body. It's the first thing we have, and it's the last thing we'll have when we leave. It's our body, and we have 1,000,001 stories and histories for each inch of it. So if they're completely without nature of their own, why not switch the story around? And the best way to do that is to use our creativity by writing and creating something. And then maybe subconsciously we're looking at ourselves in the mirror while we're brushing our teeth at night, and we see something positive, or we say something positive. You say it aloud, or you just looking, you're like, oh, that looks good, that's attractive, or whatever the thing is, it can shift, and then our lives get better, and then our outlook gets better, and then we treat other people better, because the way we dissect and criticize our body is the way we dissect and criticize other people. And it can shift through art. I remember seeing Next to Normal on Broadway, and there was just something about that day and that piece and that work where I walked out and we were on the subway and everyone was beautiful. And not just in this vague, generic way, in very specific ways. People were different sizes, heights, widths to their body, colors and shades. Everyone, for at least that moment, and it kind of started fading as I went along, because then the mind started being like, well, they could really just, but for like a minute or two, everyone was beautiful in their own unique way that was triggered by the music and by the art of Next to Normal. And it had nothing to do with looks. It had to do with like mental illness. And so you never know what you're putting out into the world and how it's going to affect other people. You never know what story you're telling and how it's going to cause someone to think differently about something completely different from the story or on point with the story. Yes. If it's Bella or Legally Blonde or whatever it is, or it's completely different, the person goes off and looks at something anew. And that's the most important thing. If you can examine the same object but with new eyes, then you are an artist, and you are taking your art and you are allowing other people to examine what they have taken for granted or the stories that they have about things in their bodies and their minds, and to look at it from a new perspective. And so just to be clear about that, thank you, Alicia. That's
Thank you,
really
Alicia.
great. Great seeing you. Hope to see you back in New
You
York. We're going to go to the other part. I'm just going to go through some questions that people could ask, and you should write these down for later, so because these are deeper questions. Okay. We talk about character development. What is the origin story of your character? Were they born with these attributes? Did something happen to them? What changed them? What is the Spider-Man, toxic spider, radioactive spider incident that gave them this, or the accident, or whatever it is? And this hints at narratives later on. And if they had a change, if they had an arc and trajectory in their character, here's another question. What were they naive about in the world before this change happened? So like we mentioned in horror films, people are most naive about sex until they hit puberty. So the obsession in a lot of those horror films is making out with the girl in the shed, or going out to the woods and, you know, getting to second or third base. These are attributes that we were naive about, that we're exploring, and then our fear comes and murders everyone. Or does it, or does something else. But like, what were they naive about? And here is the plot. Here is the drive of your character, whoever it is. So you've created this character, you have all these attributes and traits. What must they do? What is the thing they must do, or they will literally or spiritually die? Now that is what your character's goal is in life. What is the goal of Mr. Holland's opus? What is the goal of Bella, to have adventures? What is the goal of the whale, to reconnect with his offspring, to reconnect with the child he made, despite when he weighed less. And something happened to him that triggered this massive change in his life. So what must they do in this life? Otherwise they cannot rest. And in some cases, like if it's a superhero movie, they will literally die. In a lot of cases, if it's not a superhero movie, they will spiritually die or decay inside, or they will be lost. We've talked about the antagonist. And then the last thing is, the last question is, list some of the techniques and strategies the character uses to move through life. So I listed Mr. Magoo's cluelessness is one of his, how he moves through life. I've listed, if we're using Forrest Gump is someone who has a quote unquote low IQ, but what moves him through life is the aphorisms his mama taught him, and that he's a good son and he has a good heart. That's it. And with that, he goes around the world. He plays on the Olympic ping pong team. He meets presidents. He meets rock and roll legends. With that key trait, he goes on an adventure. And so how and why are they underestimated for this? Murder, She Wrote. She's just a silly old woman. What does she know? She solves murders. She's underestimated because she's a silly old woman. No one listens. They was like, oh, get your silly old woman. They turn that to their advantage. Forrest Gump turns his cluelessness to his advantage, and many, many smarter people than Forrest Gump who he becomes friends with, many other people who think they're going to use him to their advantage, fall by the wayside. But he has a love in his life, and that's Jenny, as we all know. And Jenny sees the good in Forrest, but Jenny is also, fucked up. But she sees the good in Forrest, and sees the complexities in Forrest and all these things. And they go on these different journeys, and he's in love with her. And in some way, she's in love with him, but not necessarily in the same way. Like, she doesn't probably want to, like, be his lover, but it's more like a brother. It's more a platonic love. It's bigger than just, body parts going into other body parts. So we're going to talk about story. So here's some techniques you can use for stories and where your characters fit. And this is addressing some of the questions people had about starting with the situation or how to hide something. So the first and easiest thing is to pick up a newspaper. Remember those? But pick up a newspaper and find stories that remind you of that lead character that is a part of you. And then you twist and begin turning that. Now that's the most basic one. But Blake Schneider, who wrote Save the Cat, has some other techniques that are easy to do, and you could just toggle back and forth with them and play with it. Another one is to reverse it. You take something serious and you turn it into a comedy. So you take something about a serial killer, about a vampire, and you turn it into a comedy. Guess what the next one is? You take something comedic and you turn it into a drama. So you just flip it and you find like, oh, this is tragic because A, B, and C happens. Another technique is FBI out of water or cop out of water. So you name, a few places a cop or FBI agent has never been sent to solve a crime, or is a highly unusual place. And that's what your lead character is doing. Monk is someone who's a hypochondriac, and he deals with some of the nastiest people, and he solves crimes. And he has OCD, he has ADD. He is the type of person who should not be around crime scenes, who should not be around cops and criminals, but he has an ability that is helpful, but at the same time that puts his life and his mental health at risk, which is why Monk is a great character, because he has these two dualities of like, I don't want people to touch me, I don't like people to breathe on me, I hate dirt, but I'm going to crime scenes where there are bodies. And I'm dealing with my own fear and neuroses and all these other things. And that fear and neuroses and specificity is what allows him to solve crimes. And so you take your character and you put them in an unusual situation and you give them a mystery. You give them something that they're trying to solve. If they're an FBI agent, if they're a cop, if they're a private investigator, odds are they're solving a crime. If there's something else, they're figuring out a clue, they're sussing something out. That's a question posed in your mind that you can transpose onto the character. So that's one technique, is cop out of water or investigator out of water. Another method of narrative is school. Now, we all know that one of the most prolific narratives is high school dramas and high school comedies, but it doesn't have to be just high schools. It could be a training ground or something you're learning, or college, or a specific type of school, a specific type of training. Grey's Anatomy, they aren't just doctors who are residents, they are surgeons who are residents, who are new, who are at the bottom of the totem pole, who have all this education, have these different types of surgeons. And you're seeing them on their first day. The pilot is their first day at the hospital. And it's a particular type, very specific city, Seattle, and a specific type of doctor who's receiving training. But you could be solving, you could be in, a cooking school. You could be in a hippie commune, whatever the school is. You could be in a school for people who make hats, Mad Hatter, a finishing school, a school where people are studying cheese or wine, like the Netflix movie a few months ago. A Black guy from Memphis who's learning how to become a wine expert.
Yeah.
So his parents run a soul food restaurant, but he wants to explore this other element. So the question is, at what point does soul food meet fine wine, which is associated with Western European sort of food, and how do you combine the two into his life? And you give him the drama of the mother being sick, needing money to be a fine wine expert, because it's a privilege that a lot of people don't have, that requires a lot of financing and all these different struggles as they're running a business. I would add business. Family business is another one.
Mm-hmm.
What is a family business? Are they a school of are they a family of vampires? It has an expertise in a particular type of craft or trade they're doing. Is it Sweeney Todd? What is the business that the youngin is getting inducted to that they don't want to be? And that can make it a comedy, if it's something funny, or it can make it The Godfather. If I don't want to get involved in this business, but you're the smart one, and I don't want to get sucked in, and he gets sucked in. And so he was a mama's boy who gets sucked in. That's the invisible scar of being too soft, of not being the type that the mafia would prefer. He's too soft, but his softness allows him to negotiate things in other ways. You see how his cleverness allows his dad to not get assassinated, because he's observant, because he stops by, because he's a good son, and he hides his dad's body. He doesn't go out there with a gun and shoot people because he doesn't have a gun. And that's not his personality. He hides the body of his dad while he's in the hospital so he can't get hurt. Another technique that you might want to use for narratives is verses, one versus the other. So we've talked about the antagonist. We've talked about the world your protagonist is going into. So this versus that. And it could be either in a fight, or they can be falling in love. A prostitute and a priest fall in love over in a small town while something in Blake Snyder's book, instead of massage parlors being opened up. Whatever that thing is, it doesn't always have to be fighting like, Predator versus Terminator. They could be two unlikely types falling in love. Your protagonist and your antagonist can be falling in love. And that makes it a romance comedy, or romance drama, or romance tragedy, depending upon how you look at it. And then the last one is serial killer. Name an unusual person we suspect of murder or a grand conspiracy, like my boss is a serial killer, or a grand conspiracy. My high school science teacher is a drug kingpin. Hint, hint, Breaking Bad. My real estate agent, my boring loser real estate agent, is also a drug kingpin, but is laundering money for a drug kingpin, and that becomes Ozarks. So you take a trade, you take something, you go like, this unusual person is doing something that is nefarious, that involves murder, that involves mayhem, that is connected to a grander conspiracy, and they're using their skill to facilitate this. Carrie in Homeland, as Ann says, that is also true. Who has mental illnesses, but is able to use that to her advantage. So I'm looking at other questions.
The Q&A.
So these are some of the techniques for picking a narrative. So I'll review these techniques. You either go to a newspaper and you rip from the headlines and you adapt it to what you want. You take something serious and turn it into a comedy. You take something tragic, turn it into a comedy, or you take something tragic and you take something serious, turn it into a comedy, you take something comedic, you turn it into a tragedy, turn it into little fires everywhere. I think is something that in most situations would be a comedy. A black woman moves in next door to a white woman, or they become best friends or whatever, and little fires everywhere. It's like, no, this is a drama. And this is the drama carried to the nth degree. People are going to get hurt. Another version is the cop or investigator out of water. So they have to figure out a mystery or solve a crime in an unusual area. And your character's traits facilitate them figuring out this mystery. Another version of examining an area is you go to a school or an institution. And so you pick an unusual institution and you put your lead character there. Grey's Anatomy, finishing school, cooking school, law school, making cheese, learning how to be a wine expert. Another version of examining a narrative is one versus the other, protagonist versus antagonist. You could try them fighting, or you can try them falling in love. Or Mr. and Mrs. Smith, they do both. They are fighting, they are married and they're fighting, and by fighting they fall in love, or they rediscover a passion that they had in a marriage that was dead. And then the last one is serial killer or grand conspiracy. Now, obviously these are not standalones because some of these combine. Mr. and Mrs. Smith is one versus the other, as well as serial killer genre. They're involved in a grand conspiracy, and also it's one versus the other. And so you can combine these two. It could be at a school that also is involved with the grand conspiracy. It can be something that is one versus the other in a grand conspiracy or at a school. So you can mix and match these styles. One is not better than the other, and you can find what best suits your character. I'm going to go through a few other things that are listed in Save the Cat Goes to the Movies, Blake Schneider's book that you should all get and read. Goes through many different genres. I'm not going to read them out to you because you should read it yourself, but I will just give the overview of these different genres that most movies and most stories are based around. One is Monster in the House. As we spoke about, these are horror movies as well as Alien. It can be Fatal Attraction. It can be Ring, Scream, Saw. There's a monster in a particular location that is haunting the house or the school or the setting, and they have to get it out. Number two is The Golden Fleece. So it's Jason and the Argonaut. What does that mean? Someone goes on an adventure. They go on an adventure with an object that they have to get somewhere, or an object that helps them. So we have Saving Private Ryan, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, Bad News Bear, Ocean's 11 is an adventure. Maria Full of Grace, she's carrying, she's smuggling the drugs with her that she has to use to get to the United States. What are the characteristics of Maria? She's a good daughter. Oh, these other things you can list. And you give her an unseemly job. Out of the Bottle is another genre. A magical analysis of movies using magic. So we have Freaky Friday, Body Switch. Your character can switch bodies with someone else. Cocoon, they become younger. Nutty Professor, What Women Want. I can hear what women are thinking. Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind. Another genre 4 is Dude with a Problem. So what's Dude with a Problem? Innocent dude or dudette is in big trouble. So Die Hard, 3 Days of the Condor, Deep Impact. A normal dude or dudette comes into like, oh crap, a stoner is dealing with like an alien invasion. Whatever that thing It's an average Joe who has these these traits in a subtle way that then gets exacerbated due to the situation. They get called upon in Die Hard to become a cop in Los Angeles when they're a New York cop and to stop a terrorist attack. Another genre is rites of passage. So someone, and we talked about that last time, about a rites of passage is a coming of age story. You're going through something, whether it's Ordinary People, Kramer versus Kramer, Napoleon Dynamite set in a high school. These are things. Buddy love stories. So Lethal Weapon, When Harry Met Sally. They have Titanic listed here, which is funny. Brokeback Mountain. These are buddy love stories that are, you know, very strong. What is a buddy love that, you know, transcends that? And I would include Die Hard. It has a thematic tone of buddy love between the black guy who's an officer in LA and Bruce Willis's character. It's a buddy love story. If you look at it and what's going on, the wife is there, but the moment when the black cop sees at the end Bruce Willis's character, it's a slow motion shot as they're coming towards each other. There's sparks flying behind them and fire. These are symbols of love that are there, and it's very subtle, but that's who he really fell in love with throughout the course of he already loved his wife. What he really fell in love with was this LA cop who's guiding him and who's helping him out while he's trying to save his wife. The Why Done It, the detective sees the dark side and they discover us. They discover American democracy is corroded and all the president's men. They discover in Blade, he's an effective vampire killer because Blade is a vampire himself. They discover Fargo, the seedy underbelly of small town North Dakota in Fargo. Whatever it is, you find Mystic River, you find that, and the character's detective work leads them back to the realization of something is corrupt here that's much larger than the initial mystery. Mystic River, something's corrupt here, bigger than the initial problem, than the initial crime that I've stumbled upon. And we are all indicted in this, in expected and unexpected ways. I love this genre, which is the Fool's Triumph. So a lot of you have stuff about being soft, or about being, you know, this or that, or lacking something. So a Fool's Triumph is, like I said, Forrest Gump, Legally Blonde, 40-year-old virgin. You take something about yourself, and this person starts off as the underdog and out of water, and they discover something. I would say Forrest Gump is a combination of adventure mixed with a Fool's Triumph, because he's going on this journey. But it's a Fool's Triumph that he's out of his element everywhere he goes. He's an underdog everywhere he goes, except for when he's on the shrimp boat with Bubba or whatever. When he's on the shrimp boat, he meets someone who's like him, who's a black guy, you know, but otherwise he's out of his element everywhere, and an underdog everywhere, and he succeeds. And people love stories like that. And it allows you to highlight your insecurities or your flaws and make them lovable and make them triumphant. And that will happen in real life. 9 was 2 more. 1 is institutions, and we talked a little bit about that when we talked about schools. But an institution doesn't have to be a school. It is a commune. It is police officer. It is training days. And so your individual enters this institution and changes it. Ethan Hawke's character in Training Day enters the institution, and they compress it into 1 day in the life of what's going on. And you see this rookie cop who's new to this area get involved with like the worst cop possible. And you get a scope of the land through this institution that he's getting embedded in, which is a SWAT team, as you know, that's busting for drugs, that's also selling and dealing drugs. He doesn't know that, but he changes the institution by being the fish out of water. And the last one that we all love and know is the superhero. The superhero that's most prevalent now, obviously Spider-Man, Superman, all of these have origin stories, Matrix, Gladiator, But then Lion King, but it could also be something like Raging Bull is a superhero who has his tenacity, the strength in his gut to overcome things that, you know, later on becomes his downfall. But that is a superhero story. So those are 10 genres. And if you take your character, you can put them in these different genres and jiggle them around and see how they work. If they're a fish out of water in an unusual institution, in an office that's very specific, office space, a superhero, what are their traits as being a superhero? Are they on a fool's triumph? Where are they going? Where are they entering as a fool and as an underdog that they excel at? A detective story. What is it? What are we discovering? What is a crime? A variation of the detective story is the detective story leads to a bigger, darker side that is indicting larger society. So that's a variation of a detective story. Dude with a problem. Regular dude having a regular average day, and then, oh shit, something happens. Or regular dude heading home for the holidays, and something happens, and they're called upon. Their weakness and their strength and the characters are called upon. Buddy love, sidekick, whatever it is, or antagonist, protagonist love. And then magic out of the bottle, something pops up, genie pops up out of the bottle. Golden Fleece goes on an adventure, and then monster in the house are different genres you can examine and take your character and put them into. And so that's my spiel. Do people have other questions?
You can see in the Q&A section.
Yes. So I will say, you have to do something at the end of this, which is you have to learn to not only forgive that part you talk to, but you have to talk to it differently. And most of the time, you're not literally talking to it. You're subconsciously talking to it. You're making little comments, little looks. We have to begin. And you begin, it's hard to do the entire body, so you pick a part. You pick a spot. You pick a scar, a bruise, a landmark. It can even be a, like Legally Blonde, a positive trait to some extent that people take for granted or assume is for stupid people. If you're blonde or you're too pretty, you take something and you really look at it, and you look at and you talk and you recognize the things that have been said about it, what the narrative is, when you bought into that narrative, and then you change it. And then you start looking at yourself in the mirror differently. And it starts from that one part of your body. And then you go on to another part of your body. And you go on to another part. And pretty soon, you are loving your entire body. You are loving your entire self. You are seeing the good attributes. And then you're seeing that in other people. Now, as we reviewed, are these good attributes? No. Are they bad attributes? No. They're empty. So the question is, what narrative do you choose to stick on that part? I would say the smartest thing would be to choose something that's empowering, that's uplifting, that's transformational, that activates you, that gives you joy, that gives you love, and allows you to see others with the same eyes. That's what this exercise is all about. The narratives will come and go, and really this is a lot deeper than anything that could be taught in 2 hours. This is just like a taste of a little bit of some of the questions. But begin looking at yourself and your physical body and your invisible scars and your happy scars and other things that you have, and talking to them and retelling the narrative, retelling the story. You can rewrite the script to what you say to yourself and other people. I'm looking at questions.
Yeah.
Oh, is this a tool you might come up with a character? Is this a tool you might use to come up with a character, but in actually? No, if you're coming up with the character, that trait should probably be there in the story. Now, what element of that you could choose, but it should probably be there to remind you. It's about brutal honesty, not about, and the second we give ourselves an escape hatch, we will take it. The second we give ourselves an excuse to, well, I'm not really going to talk about this. Our mind will take it. So brutally honest, I will say, no, you should probably actually have that trait there and make it as uncomfortable as possible and allow yourself to squirm underneath that. Anna writes about women and body issues. Look at that story. Is a family history a curse? That's a good question. Is it a curse? Is it a mystery that she has to solve? Is it a crime that she has to solve? Is it an institution she's entering? Is it a family business that they're entering? A beautician? We've passed down this beauty parlor for 3 generations or 4 generations. Our moms have been making hair since the Civil War, whatever the thing is. What is that institution or family business that you can use that highlights the insecurities and things we say about ourselves? How do you make your work more comedic? By Cherry, you exaggerate it. So you take something, Mr. Magoo is just someone who has a stigma, has an eye problem. So everything's a problem with Mr. Magoo. And so he realized eye problem, people think I'm an old man or I can't see. I'm going to make this character an old man. Who would think that a cartoon for kids, cartoons are for kids, right? Most of the time. Why would you create an old man as a cartoon character for kids? Because it's funny, because it's hilarious, because he took that thing about your grandfather and he just exaggerated it into all areas of life. So Legally Blonde is a comedy because they took Legally Blonde as being blondes are stupid and they exaggerated it with her purse, with the pink she wears, with the little doggy, with all these little attributes of like, you think I'm stupid? I'm going to embrace this fully. And at the same time, I'm going to go to the top law school in the country. It wouldn't be Legally Blonde if she was hardworking, smart, stayed to herself, and was quiet and shy, and just happened to have blonde hair. That's kind of boring.
No.
She has to exaggerate it and make it like, okay, I'm a stupid blonde who's going to go to Harvard. Please remind me of number 3 on the genre list. Monster in the House, Golden Fleece. Number 3 is Out of the Bottle. I kind of skipped that because I don't know it as much. But Out of the Bottle is Freaky Friday, Body Switch, Cocoon, Nutty Professor, like Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind. I like that one. So something magical is happening. An asteroid falls, or you drink the potion, or Spider-Man gets bitten by a toxic spider, a radioactive spider. Something magical happens. And that character, the character traits that you've conceived of come out of that. They're like, oh, I have this ability, or this ability that I had before that was a negative is now exaggerated in a positive way. And I'm able to hear people's thoughts. I'm able to read people. I'm able to go invisible because people don't like the way I look. So I feel like I'm invisible. Whatever the thing is, that is Out of the Bottle, whatever magic you want to use. So are there any other questions? I'm just going through this.
We don't have more questions here, but what about like the blend of 2 gender, like investigator of the water with body love, for example, like the blend of 2 gender. I don't know, like if you blend 2 very specific gender,
most of the time there are going to be blends. Most of these are not pure.
Okay.
It's almost impossible to find a pure one genre.
Yeah.
Like even the ones I read are combinations. Like Freaky Friday is a versus story, but it was also obviously Out of the Bottle magic. And it's also high school, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. Okay.
Institution. So it's like a blend of multiple things that you're attracted to, really. And so sometimes I take events for a story I was writing. It was like motels and that genre mixed with something else. And then I keep circling around it. And then it became something else at a certain point. It just popped out. But it's a mix and match thing you have to go back and forth with.
Yeah.
Martha is more of a problem in finding what the character must do or die. Yeah, that's the biggest thing you have to spend time on, because that drives your character, and that drives people in life. Like, what are you going to do? What must you do? I shouldn't say what do you want to do, because I want to do a lot of things. I think it'd be cool to be a stand-up comedian and try that out. I don't need to do that. That's just something like, oh yeah, I want to do that sometime, or I want to paint more. But the question is, that's not a good character to say like, oh yeah, I want to paint more. All right, well, what
Okay.
must you do? What must you do? So like, I want to paint more because it's the only thing that lets me access my memory, and I'm losing my memory. And so if I don't paint, I'm going to become a different person, or this is how I related to my mom and my mom's dad, whatever the thing is, that gives it some emotional need outside of just a want. And in school, we were very clear about what's the difference between a want and a need. A want, we have plenty of wants, and your character have plenty of wants, but what must they do? Or they will experience a psychological or psychic death, or literal death. A lot of times if you get stuck, fall in love with the girl, fall in love with the boy, whatever it is, get married, fall in love. If you're stuck, I feel like in the past, 100 years ago, there was a lot more romance stories, and I think we're a lot more cynical. So romance has become like the B or C plot to a lot of things. Like people don't really talk about love in a serious way, or in an investigative, truly in-depth way. Most of the time it's like, I'm in school, I'm blah, blah, blah. Oh yeah, we're falling in love. But you can also, your must-do can also be love. What must your character fall in love with? Who must your character learn to love? And it doesn't have to be sexual love. It could be your mom, it could be your dad, it could be your boss that you're obsessed with, fatal attraction. It could be someone you're obsessed with. So the love becomes creepy. Monster in the house, fatal attraction, also love.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Aurin, I think we are done. I don't know if somebody have another question, but thank you very much. If you want to check the first Aurin classes, you can go to our YouTube channel. It's there. And also invite you to our new classes. We have one with Michelle Hausman, running a theater, the role of an artist in society, and also one with Christopher and Justin Sweater, that are the set designers of A Wonderful World, and it's going to be great. So please join us also on Instagram, and thank you for your time. Thank you, Aurin. I hope we can have like something more longer than maybe a workshop. I don't know. Sometimes I know that you're a really busy playwright, but just saying, because I'm looking here that it's many people that wants to continue like develop these works. Thank you, Aurin.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, well, thank you all. Everybody saying thank you, Aurin.
Say thank you to your body. Thank you to your bruises and bumps and scars. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.